Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome. So the last video was of Wales's worst serial killer, Peter Moore, which was the second video of the series which we are doing of Wales' most notorious killers. Today's video will be of the third video in the series, and today's video is of another horrendous case of Clive Sharp, who horrendously took the life of his girlfriend's housemate, Catherine Gowing. And could the justice system have prevented this from happening? In my opinion, 100% yes. Please stay to the end to find out more. First, a disclaimer is needed as always, as we will be talking about extremely sensitive subjects involving sexual assault, violent sexual assault, murder, body dismemberment, abduction, and sexual assault of a child. If you do not want to hear about such things, I totally understand. So I suggest if you're offended by any of these subjects mentioned, I would advise you not to watch this video and come back later for another video. Thank you all very much for watching, and let's move on. Today we will start with Catherine Gowing, our beloved victim. Catherine Gowing was originally from Offaly County in Ireland. She was born in 1976 and was 37 at the time of this case in 2012. Catherine grew up on a farm with her mother, Maureen, her father John, and her sister Emma. As you can imagine, living on a farm would have made it near damn impossible not to love animals, and Catherine really did love animals, so much so that everybody knew that she would end up working with animals as she grew up. Catherine was very close to her family and was described by her mother as nothing less than a perfect human being. She was also described as an amazing, loving and caring person who loved nothing more than travelling, exploring, and of course, animals. Catherine was very intelligent and attended St Brendan's Community College in Birr, Offaly County, Ireland. This is where she excelled in biology and other science subjects. She was a member of a small group of students who successfully completed honours grade in all three leaving certificate science subjects. After completing college in Ireland, she went on to a university in Budapest, where she studied to become a vet. Whilst attending this university, Catherine met a woman called Jane Doyle, who was also from Ireland and also studying to become a vet. Naturally, Catherine and Jane became very good friends very quickly. In 2011, both Catherine and Jane had both graduated from university and managed to attain employment at the same veterinary practice, D.E. Evans Veterinary Practice, located in the quiet North Wales town of Mold. Mold is located in deep countryside with a lot of farmland, and it was a very quiet town with a population of less than 10,000 people at the time. So this town really stood out for Catherine, as she grew up on a farm and was very used to the quiet, and in fact she really enjoyed it. After Catherine and Jane had secured their jobs at the veterinary practice, they both thought it would be a good idea to move in together. It made a lot of sense really, as they would be working together and they were already friends. They moved to a town called New Brighton in Flintshire, which was about a 10-minute drive from their workplace in Mold. So life was going well for Catherine. She loved her job and she was in very high demand, and she also had a brilliant rapport with customers. Everyone who had met Catherine loved her, and at this point Catherine could not be happier. Once Catherine and Jane had settled in their new home, Jane started to date a man named Clive Sharp. Now Clive Sharp wasn't a very nice man at all. In fact, he was terrifying. At this point in the case in 2012, Clive Sharp was 46 years old and he was originally from Sealand, Flintshire, just west of Chester. At the time of his arrest, he claimed he had no fixed address, but he did in fact have an address registered in his name in Coisy Park Industrial Estate, Bethesda, Gwynedd, North Wales. Like I said, Clive was not a very nice man. He had previous convictions, and they weren't for anything minor either. The crimes he had committed prior to this case were horrific, involving a history of violence against women stretching back over 30 years. Clive had been previously jailed 3 times for vile sexual offences, starting when he was just 16. In 1982, when Clive was 16, he was convicted and he had been given a supervision order for making indecent phone calls and sending indecent letters to women. A year later, in 1983, He was jailed for 3 years for the violent sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl after holding a piece of glass to her neck. He was just 17 and she just 15. And then 11 years later, in 1994, Clive Sharp was jailed for another 3 years for a sex attack on a friend's wife. And within months of his release, he was jailed again for 8 years for false imprisonment after tying up a woman and threatening her with a knife. Also, whilst attending sex offenders treatment program in the 1990s, he revealed he had a long-standing fantasy of imprisoning, raping and murdering a woman. Also, for some strange reason, he was not made to sign the sex offenders register, the reason being that his offences predated the register's introduction in 1997. So not only did he not have to sign the register after doing his time, he was just a free man. He posed such a risk to women in society. Even a detailed report was released stating that his repeat offending could escalate into exactly what he fantasised about. His final contact with any sort of probation was in 2001. So, in my opinion, the events we speak of in this video could have been prevented entirely. Even if he was made to just sign that register, this could have been prevented. Anyway, after Clive Sharp's release, he got married to a woman named Sian in 2003, just 6 months after they had met. I'm not sure if Sian knew about his criminal history or not, but she said at first their relationship was great. Even her children looked at Clive as a father figure in their lives. But about 6 years into their marriage, Clive changed. He became very violent, physically and sexually, and also mentally. She took regular beatings of him, and he sexually assaulted her on a regular basis. One time on her birthday, Clive was fixing the pipe and it burst, squirting water everywhere, and he got soaking wet. He got so angry he started to punch Sian in the face. He threw her to the floor and started kicking her in the side, breaking multiple ribs. In 2011, Sian finally decided enough was enough and packed Clive's bags and threw him out after he'd forced himself upon her aggressively and disappeared for 2 days. And then he came back after those 2 days, but his bags were already packed, and that would be the last time that Sian would see Clive. Thank God she got out of that relationship before it was too late. I can't imagine what she was thinking when she found out what happened next. In between the relationships with Sian and Jane, Clive had other casual relations with other women. One woman being a woman who lived within close proximity of where Clive lived in Gwynedd. Skipping forward now to the events of this case. Friday the 11th of October 2012, Jane Doyle had gone back to Ireland to visit friends and family and would not be back until late on the Sunday evening. Catherine would be home alone at this time for the whole duration of the weekend. On the Saturday, however, the 12th of October, around 8:40 p.m, Catherine was seen on CCTV outside an Asda in Queensferry, Flintshire. Sadly, this would be the last time that Catherine would be seen alive. Clive, on the other hand, knew that Jane would not be around that weekend and took full advantage. He was meant to be spending the night at his ex-girlfriend's house in Gwynedd. Unfortunately, they got into a heated argument, and after she refused to perform certain sex acts, he left her tied to the bed and walked out, leaving her tied up for hours. As he drove away, he remembered that Jane was away for the weekend and Catherine was home alone. He drove to Catherine's house in Mould and waited until she was asleep and stalked her outside her house, before quietly gaining entry to her home. After all, he had been there plenty of times before, so he knew his way around the home pretty well. After gaining access to the house, he made his way upstairs to Catherine's bedroom, where sadly he tied her to the bed and subjected her to over 4 hours of unimaginable violent sexual assault. After Clive had got his satisfaction, he then strangled Catherine until there was no life left in her body, therefore fulfilling his sick and twisted fantasies. And horrifically, if that wasn't bad enough, the next day he went to buy a hacksaw, bin liners, a petrol can, heavy-duty tape and bleach. He then went back to Catherine's flat and went on to dismember her body before wrapping her body parts in plastic bags and disposed of them in various remote locations in and around North Wales. Nobody knew what happened to Catherine until Monday the 14th of October, when Catherine did not show up for work at D.E. Evans Veterinary Clinic. Obviously, Catherine loved her job, and this was very unusual for her not to show up, especially without any word or phone call. She also hadn't shown up to meet a friend for dinner on the Sunday evening, and she was also not home when Jane returned from Ireland that weekend. Colleagues knew that something was wrong straight away and filed a missing persons report. At this point, nobody knew of Catherine's fate except Clive. As far as everyone else knew, Catherine was only missing at this point. Police immediately launched the biggest search operation for Catherine. Over 40 specialist officers were mobilised over 25 days to scour skies, land and sea in the New Brighton area, where she had allegedly disappeared. Police conduct house-to-house calls and search any CCTV they had around in that area. That is where they find the CCTV of Catherine leaving Asda in Queensferry, Flintshire, on the Saturday evening around 8:20 p.m. They also appeal to the public in a search for Catherine's burgundy-coloured Renault Clio, which has also not been seen. Whilst conducting their searches, police set up an incident room and profusely appealed to the public for any information. They had multiple tips come in, but a couple stood out to them in particular. And one in particular was to look into a man named Clive Sharp, and to search for an area in Pinaford Lane. Police soon realised that Catherine's housemate Jane was in a relationship with Clive Sharp. They do some research into Clive's background and find his criminal violent history with women, and this caused a worry for concern straight away. Police start digging into Clive's movements on that Friday evening and into the days after Catherine had gone missing. They found out about the ex-girlfriend that he tied up and left alone, which definitely made them suspicious. They then delve deeper and find some damning evidence to suggest that Clive was involved in Catherine's disappearance, and were fearful that Catherine had been seriously harmed. On the 13th of October 2012 at 11:20 a.m, a message was sent from Catherine's phone suggesting that she was still alive and well. Clive was also seen in Queensferry between 1:50 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. that same day, which is where he was seen buying the items to dismember Catherine's body. At this time, he had made 2 attempts to use Catherine's bank card at the cash point on Station Road. This is thought to be an attempt to prove that Catherine was still alive. So even just with that evidence, it wasn't looking good for Clive Sharp. At 4:25 p.m. that same day, Clive was caught on CCTV filling up the petrol can he had bought earlier that day. Then at 5:20 p.m. the same day, on the 13th, he was seen on CCTV again at a depot in Pinaford Lane, parking his car and leaving it there, and walking away. The next day, early hours on Sunday morning, Clive was seen walking back to pick up his car, and was seen driving it at 1:30 a.m, driving towards Sealand on a Welsh road beyond Garden City. And on the following Monday after Catherine's disappearance, Catherine's Clio was found burnt out on Pinaford Lane near a disused quarry surrounded by woodland, which was near Catherine's home. The Clio, as I said, was found burnt out, and it had Catherine's laptop, a bent hacksaw blade, and a burnt suitcase inside. Police immediately cordoned off the area and conducted an extensive search of the area, where they found Catherine's mobile phone in a pond nearby. With all this evidence gathered up, even without finding Catherine's body, it was clear to police that Catherine had met a terrible fate at the hands of Clive Sharp. All they needed to do now was prove their suspicions. On Tuesday the 15th, Clive Sharp was arrested on the suspicion of murder, and police continued this search now for Catherine's body and appealed to the public if they might have seen Clive's Volvo in the Sealand area. Clive, of course, denied all allegations made against him, but police continued their search for Catherine, and following another tip-off, police searched the area of Sealand and sadly found remains of Catherine's body in a field near Manor Road, known as the Lum. And one day later, on the following Friday, exactly 1 week after Catherine went missing, more remains were found at Ferry Lane in Chester by an off-duty police officer. The remains were found about 3 miles away from the first remains, alongside the River Dee. Sadly, police would not recover any more of Catherine Gowing's body. That evening, on Friday the 19th of October 2012, police charged Clive Sharp with the murder of Catherine Gowing, after evidence had been carefully reviewed. On Monday the 14th of January 2013, the trial of Clive Sharp began at Maud Crown Court, which surprisingly, Clive Sharp pleaded guilty to the murder of Catherine Gowing. He was remanded in custody while they decided on what would be a suitable sentence for his terrible crimes. Clive Sharp was then sentenced at Maud Crown Court on the 25th of February 2013. Mr. Justice Griffith Williams ordered that he serve a life sentence with a minimum serve of 37 years before he can be considered for parole. He added Sharp posed such a danger to women he may never be released. Passing sentence, Mr. Justice Griffith Williams told Clive Sharp, I quote, "This is a horrific cold-hearted murder, carried out to gratify your perverted sexual desires." He also told Sharp his offended was aggravated by the following factors. He said there was a very high degree of planning and premeditation. The second, that you entered the house without invitation in the middle of the night. The third, that you tied her up, you imprisoned her before subjecting her to rape. And the fourth, the dismembering and disposing of her body, a callous act which has added to the grief of her family. And finally, the previous convictions which highlight the seriousness of this case. In a statement made by Mrs. Emma Maguire, Catherine's sister, which was partially read out at the hearing, she detailed the impact the murder had on Catherine's family. She said, "That man has caused my family unimaginable pain, suffering, grief, and the recurring nightmare of what he did to Catherine before she died. My parents are heartbroken. They miss her smiling face, her passion, and the energy she exuded." She also added, "My sister was a wonderful woman who lived life fully. Our lives will never be the same again." As well as her family, Catherine left a lasting impression on the North Wales community. Following a church service held in Buckley, months after Clive Sharp was jailed, Catherine's friend and colleague, Carol Davis, described many happy memories between the two. She said, "I have many happy memories of Catherine which I will cherish. Catherine loved her films and music. She would always be humming a tune or singing something." In total, more than 300 people attended the memorial service held in Catherine's memory. Photographs of Catherine and candles was placed at the front of the nave, and the congregation sang some of Catherine's favourite hymns, including Amazing Grace and Calon Ran. Veterinary nurse Kate Kinred told how she and Catherine would pull practical jokes on one another, while Father Francis Doyle, who led the service, said Catherine made a tremendous and lasting impression on everyone she met. It was at an earlier service, however, that Catherine's sister painted a picture that carries the most poignant message. Depicting how Catherine had lived her life in accordance with the famous words of English author Albert Pine, Emma said, "What we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world is and remains immortal." I couldn't agree more. And that is it for this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed it, so you don't miss my next video. As always, my thoughts go out to the family of the victim. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!